G'day. Andrew Gill here for Trades Women Australia. We are going around Australia. This is our second webcast we're running. Tonight, it's all about mental health on the work site, at home. We've got a fantastic program. Have you still got your Easter eggs? Have you got anything left? All I've got left is proof that the Easter Bunny was here. Beautiful gold number and a few little Easter eggs, but that's about it. And I've gone for a run or two. I hope you've done the same. Everybody, Trades Women Australia is a non-for-profit organisation whose purpose is to promote gender equality and empowerment for all women and girls to access, participate and succeed in trades. And as I said, this session is focusing on mental health for trades on-site and off-site. And it's all the initiative of Fiona McDonald, who is the founder and managing director of Trades Women Australia. Fiona, you are there in your home office right now. How are you this afternoon?
Hi Andrew, I'm really well. Can't say the weather outside is too nice, but you know, we take what we can get.
Well, we must say I'm in Victoria. You're also in Victoria. We're on different sides of the bay, so to speak. I'm sort of in the peninsula area. You're down in Geelong. But let's talk about why we've chosen mental health for trades on-site and off-site, Fiona.
Yeah, sure. So the purpose of this program was to bring together our community and our network and share information and advice from our industry partners. Last week we had our very first industry panel session where we talked about apprenticeships, and there was a lot of feedback during the week about what a great event it was, which was great, but also questions about dealing with mental health, dealing with social distancing and how that can impact on wellness and mental health as well. So we thought we'd put together a panel to speak to those things to our audiences.
And we have a fantastic panel, two sensational experts. I'll just mention their name now. Maybe we'll even get a special celebrity wave from them just before we go on with a few other little bits of the introductions to the show. Michele, who is the Mental Health and Wellness CEO at APM Employment Services. Let's see if Michele can give us a bit of a hey and a bit of a wave. Say hello, Michele.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us.
Now, Michele, where are you tonight?
I'm in Sydney, I'm in Piedmont.
Wow, very nice part of the world, just there near the water there, the famous Piedmont Hotel
and
all those lovely places. You can go for a walk, but you can't go into the Piedmont Hotel at the moment, Michele, as you know. We've also have Leah Davidson, who is a professional development coach specialising in personal development and neuro-linguistic programming. Hello, Leah.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's very, very nice to be here.
Well, it's very nice to have you in. And now, which part of the world are you in, Leah?
I'm in Mount Eliza in Victoria, just outside of Frankston.
Now, well done. I won't ask you to draw a lovely map of where you are on the whiteboard, but I love seeing people with whiteboards when we're looking at webinars, so I'm very excited about that. Everyone, just before we get into all the detail, can we just maybe run a little poll and just find out, Andrew, I might have jumped ahead for you, but Andrew Power is helping us behind the scenes. Andrew, can we just pop this poll up? Because this is to see whether you're here as an apprentice, an employer, a family member, a tradie, or are you here as a secret agent? Who knows? We want you to submit that poll if you can. And also, if you'd like, we want you to push your questions out towards us. Now, at the bottom of the screen, this is old tech, grandpa technology. You can see there. If you can just use the little the chat symbol there, you can put your little chat message in there, or especially your question, because we have two experts on the panel. Also, everybody, it is about your involvement. It's about your feedback. And we're here for all trade and industry groups, but especially focusing on building, construction, civil, automotive, mining, and engineering. So let's go back to our expert panel, and they are expert. We've got people who, I suppose in some ways, Michele works with giant organisations and huge teams, and also Leah does. But let's get a sense firstly from Michele. Can you give us a sense of what your role is in just a sentence or two, Michele?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Look, APM provide a really wide range of human services support, everything from return to work services, disability employment, skills programs, and I guess most relevant for today is a wide range of psychology and mental health support and programs. And, you know, we work with government organisations and departments, we work with small enterprises, with large enterprises, with not-for-profits. So I guess we have a pretty privileged view of being able to get a great sense of what's happening in workplaces around Australia.
And Michele, can you give people just a little sense of actually how many people that you are looking after every year? Because APM is an organisation that was started in Western Australia in the 90s. It's grown. It now has hundreds of thousands of employees that you look after across the globe. Can you just give us a little snapshot of that? Because I think that gives a sense of how knowledgeable you are in terms of looking after people, both getting them ready for work, doing assessments for how they may be for a particular job, but also how they need to be looked after at different times, and particularly maybe at this time we're all experiencing.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. APM did start as quite a small organisation in Perth, and we now have more than 6,000 employees operating in 10 countries, providing similar services. So every year we help hundreds of thousands of people. Across our recent journey, we've helped more than 1 million people with different issues in their whole work, health, life journey. So, you know, as I said, we feel pretty privileged about the opportunity we have to, in the language we use, it's about enabling better lives.
That's a very important thing. That's why we're all here tonight. We do want to enable better lives, and we've all got a different kind of life we're experiencing now. Now, Leah, you also do work with large organisations. You work with, you know, some of the, let's call it some of the most successful people in Australia on getting their businesses right. You work with young students to motivate them who are, you know, already very clever and gifted. You also work one-on-one with people. Can you give us a sense of what you do and how you describe your role working with people?
Yeah, sure. Look, it started for me when I was in my 20s, and, you know, I was really struggling with some things in my life in terms of, you know, how to process bits of my childhood, and I didn't really have a lot of direction or focus. And so I started doing personal development work for myself, and I kind of started this process and realized, or kind of wondered, like, why don't we do this for people as an automatic part of our education? It has such a huge impact on me. I just wanted to share it with everyone. So that's kind of how my coaching journey started, and now that's what I do. So I work with all sorts of people, young people, old people, founders, CEOs, families, couples. I do a lot of work with an organization called Skyline, which supports VCE students and alumni, which I'm really passionate about. And it's really just about sharing some of the things that I know made such a huge difference to me, and just the way I see the world and the way I see what's even possible for me.
And I suppose in some ways you are both coaches. Michele, you're also a coach of teams, working through different skills. But I love the fact, Leah, that you started exploring how you could improve yourself, and you've now taken that to actually now work with others as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we could start with an important question. And I know that we all have a different view of what mental health is. Can you give us a sense, Michele, just exactly what is in mental health, what is not in mental health, and how it applies both in the workplace but also in our own lives?
Sure. Look, I might start by, I think most people by now, if you didn't know who the World Health Organization were before COVID-19, I think everybody's heard of the World Health Organization now. And I think they have a really lovely definition of what mental health is. And their definition is that it's a state of well-being in which every individual can realize his or her potential. They can cope with the normal stresses of day-to-day life. They can work productively and fruitfully, and that they're able to make a contribution to their community. And if you think about that, that's really what's at play right now, because are we able to realise our full potential? Are we able to cope with the stresses? Are we able to work productively? Are we able to contribute to our community? And there's some of the underlying issues. Often people think about mental health from an illness perspective. I much prefer to think about mental health from a wellness perspective. And, you know, that's not to say there are not mental health conditions. Of course there are. So when we talk about things like anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, they're mental health conditions. But mental health is really quite complex. And I guess for our purpose today, we really want to think about, it's about people being cognitively and emotionally and socially happy. And those things, whether you're at work, whether you're with family, whether you're in your community, they're the things that really matter. And I guess when I talk about mental health, I sometimes like to use the language mental fitness, because people will engage a little bit more positively when you talk about mental fitness.
Leah, I can see you nodding there. Because I'm sure you'll agree with that. What's your extension?
What I loved about that World Health Organization definition that you shared, Michele, is that it doesn't presume that we've all got it figured out. Like, it just presumes that, you know, we have some strategies to use when stuff gets really tricky. And I think, you know, COVID-19 is a perfect example of when we're all tested and when we all feel like we're stretched to our limits in terms of how to figure it out. And so I love that definition. I think that's awesome.
And what I love, I'm sorry, Leah, you keep going, sorry.
Just that, you know, I think for me, a lot of the work I do is about having people start to feel like they've got some say in how they feel about things, and have some say in the way they're interpreting things. So yeah, that's great. I'm going to look that up. I love that, Michele.
And later we're going to talk about that, let's call it the way that we all think about ourselves sometimes, Leah, in a negative way. We view the world. It's just how we're hardwired. And again, I love what you've talked about there with wellness and fitness for mental health, because it's like part of our life. And I think for a long time, mental illness has been it's been a very scary thing for people. And we always see in the paper about someone who's suffered a mental health issue, or someone who's tragically died because of they don't feel good about themselves. But to understand it from a wellness and fitness point of view is fantastic, and to see how you fit in with all the rest of our world is very, very important. Let's maybe just go back to your organisation for a minute, Michele. Let's talk about APM. How are you managing your own people, but also looking after all these different people in different kinds of work? You look after, I think, about 25% of people who maybe have a disability or some other kind of special need in the workforce. How are you managing both sides of that for your team and your clients?
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. I guess one of the philosophies that's really important for us is to walk the same steps that the community we serve walks. So a big part of what we do is disability employment. So 25% of our own workforce are people who identify as living with a disability. So, of course, we make, like all employers, appropriate accommodations for people. That's a little bit challenged now because we have the majority of our people, as so many other organisations do, working from home. So in some ways that makes things easier, in some ways it makes it more difficult. And I think really it's about understanding the individual context for each employee and making sure their leaders are providing the right kind of support, the right kind of check-ins, the right kind of care to make sure that they can continue to be as productive as they can, but also as safe as they can, because working from home isn't necessarily safer than working in the office. I think we sometimes forget that there are challenges for people working from home. Like other organisations, we also have many people who've never worked from home before and, just aren't quite sure how to do that or to manage teams. And on the flip side, that's exactly what we're doing with our customer organisations, where firstly, we're providing coaching and counselling for people who are looking for strategies to help them cope a little bit better. We're doing some proactive outbound well checks where we're picking up the phone and checking in on people about how they're doing. We're providing coaching to managers on how they can help people work from home, how they can be an active manager without being a micromanager. We're running virtual classrooms on things like mental health awareness. So I guess it's quite a broad spectrum, but I expect they're pretty similar things to what other organisations are doing.
You touched on a few things there about, because it's a new space, we may not be used to being at home. We may not be used to working in a home office. I've got a very messy but a very productive home office. I've had a home office for 7 years. But if you're a tradesperson and you are used to being on site, you're used to being on the tools, handling objects, moving, doing, working with teams, and suddenly you're not at home, there's a question that Richard has posed on our little chat line, which is a great question. He's talking specifically about how do women who may be vulnerable anyway in the home environment become more vulnerable, and also, I presume, are protected more at home in a vulnerable state. But you also talked about that, Michele, just in terms of actually just, it's a different environment. So maybe we could talk about both those points, how we can make the home workspace as safe as possible, but also think about some of those stresses that go with sharing a space with someone or other people for more than maybe what you might do, which is a few hours after work and then you go to bed. Give us a sense of how that goes.
Yeah, that second point is a really interesting one, because regrettably we're seeing an increase in reporting around domestic and family violence go up in almost every country around the globe. And so one of the challenges is that for many people, not just females, but predominantly females, work is a safe place to go. And if you can't go to work, or there's restrictions on you being out, that exacerbates an already existing problem. And that's no different to other existing problems that are there. If you're in a relationship in conflict and you are both now at home all of the time, it's going to exacerbate that situation. So the fact of being at home isn't necessarily easier, and it presents a whole range of new challenges for people to deal with.
And coming up, everybody, at the end of this webcast, we'll have a series of numbers and websites for you to contact. Let me tell you, it's fantastic to see. I've got another screen just to my left here, and I'm seeing these questions coming in. Lots of really good questions, and this maybe links back, maybe something, Leah, we might talk to you about this in a minute. There's a lovely question from Jenny Mallison. To everyone, thank you, Jenny. And she says, any tips on how to support vet secondary students through term 2? So these are students who are about to maybe get into apprenticeship or on the way to, but suddenly in term 2, they can't be at school. They'll be doing some home learning, but I know at our local secondary school, the vet program is fantastic, and we see what they're doing every day. They're building things. You see the school changing because of what they're doing. Maybe, Leah, can you give me a sense? I know you're a mother, and you have students who maybe are not vet students, but can you give me a sense, just again, maybe let's talk about some practical steps, and then we might go back to Michele too.
Yeah. I think one of the most significant things about what we're dealing with right now is that we're all kind of thrown out of whack, in the sense that no routines exist for us anymore. And our minds are like routine junkies. They love predictability. And our minds love us to be able to kind of repeat patterns that we've had in the past. And we just can't do that because it's all different. So the quicker you can get your kids sorted out with a routine of some sort, the happier they'll be, the more fulfilled they'll be, the more productive they'll be. And really that, I mean, a lot of the research I've read is that, to start with a schedule that kind of reflects the school day. So set the alarms, get up, have breakfast, and get to work by 9 a.m. Some people can't be home with their kids to be able to do this. I think probably the steepest learning curve for all of us in this time is going to be that need to self-monitor and self-regulate, that need that we have to be able to bring intentionality to what we're doing. Without that accountability of school and the teacher being there, or even the parent being there if the parent needs to leave to work, that's going to be the thing that we need to work on with our kids, to have them start to build some muscle around that. And to be honest, that could be the coolest thing that they get out of the whole thing. It could be that, school academics don't go as well as they could have, but the learning curve around bringing discipline to oneself becomes a thing that in hindsight we look back and we go, that was actually an awesome thing to get out of this whole experience. But having things like, I think having structures in place, and this goes for all of us, not just the kids in our lives, but to have structures in place where, we stay connected, we make sure that we get connected in a virtual space or on the phone, and that's more than just calling and saying hello. That's actually sharing your experience and really, really being intentional about engaging in a mode that we may not have been intentional about engaging in before. Like a lot of times being on the phone, it's just very practical. But being intentional about sharing and engaging in that space. And for the kids in particular, like to move, to make sure that they're getting some exercise and they're moving. I was playing a game online last night, playing like 500 with family members. And I thought to myself, and I said it out loud, I was like, this is awesome because I hardly even have to move. Like, not that you move much with cards anyway, but like, I was like, all I had to do is like this, and I was playing a game of cards. So just being really intentional about that aspect, because that's huge for mental health.
We heard that word a few times there, Leah, being intentional.
Yeah. Can
we hang on to that word for a minute? Yeah. There's a big whiteboard up there. Could you please write that word down so I don't forget to come back to you in a minute about intentional? Michele, let's just talk a bit more about, I think the hardest thing with, let's call it students who are at school, who are doing academic courses, they may not be able to do their drama class, but they're still doing English and others. But I think my sense would be around the vet students that, and I know at my daughter's school, the vet teachers are extraordinarily hands-on. I presume what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of planning and a lot of resourcing around what we're going to do, hopefully back in term 3. And I know in my daughter's case, it's not the same, but they can't do domestic science. They can't do cookery the same way they're going to do it. They can't do science the same way they're going to do it. But I hope that there's going to be a lot of resource. And I'd be saying back to anyone who's a vet student watching or a parent, make sure you do get in contact with your teachers. Maybe not tomorrow. Give them a few days. It's going to be tricky out there with everybody getting ready for the IT meltdown, and it's not going to be the same as it should have been. But let's understand that the teachers have been working very hard over the holidays, and they'll be getting ready. Just got a dog who's come in and opened up a door. That's funny. You didn't see that dog live though, but I felt it on my leg. I was a bit worried. Making sure that the teachers and the students do have that special time together. And I imagine the vet world, it's even more important because there's such a close association. So it's a really good question. Michele, you've got different kinds of people in the workforce, maybe people who are in jobs where they have to get a resource, get overlooked in their, they have what am I trying to say? You have some people who might have a special need, but they still have a job. That is as important to them as the rest of their lives. For those people, how are you looking after those people? Because they can't go to their job. They can't do what they love to do every day. And that purpose is changed. Do you know what's happening in that space?
It's actually one of the big challenges, Andrew. We're seeing a number of things playing out. So we're seeing an increase in levels of anxiety and uncertainty. We're seeing an increase in a loss of control. I'm no longer completely in control of all the things that I wanted to do. We're seeing people either away from their work or having reduced work or losing their work altogether. And that is so connected with people's levels of self-esteem, their identity, their purpose, as well as their ability to contribute. And then connected with that, we've got this isolation factor, which is, the loneliness and human connection and the missing out piece. And that's whether they are children at school or university students or adult workers. Those factors are playing out for everyone. So, I'd come back to Leah's point. There's a couple of things that are really important. Routine, absolutely number one. No matter what you are doing, what age you are, that ability to establish and maintain a really good routine. The basics around exercise, sleep, nutrition, hydration. Making sure that even though we're using technology so much more, that we unplug. That ability to just turn off in particular the media coverage, but to turn off for certain parts of the day. No matter what you're doing, one of the things I like people to do is to work a 50-minute hour. So if you're a student studying or you're working or you're job hunting, work for 50 minutes. Set an alarm and then stop. Stand up, take a breather, get a cup of tea, get a glass of water, and then come back again because you've just refreshed and revitalized. So some of the things that will help us be far more productive and healthy are actually relatively simple strategies, but it is about being very purposeful about applying them to everything we're doing.
Really good, simple steps. That routine is important. I know, honestly, that we are tending to stay up a bit later, wake up a bit earlier. With the work week back on, I was back to my usual routine today, and I must admit I felt better because I'd actually done more before 9:30, 10 o'clock than maybe the last 4 or 5 days. Another good question, we've had one of our board members has just sent me an SMS. You know you're in trouble when your board members are SMSing you, but she's recommending, can you just turn on your video if you can? I know we can't talk to you, but turn your video on. We'd love to see if you're out there. Give us a wave. We'll do that in a minute. Now, those steps are very important that we've just heard. Can we go back, Leah, to our mind? Because if we are told we can't do something, if we are told we aren't able to do what we are used to doing, how can we get in another mind space? Because we can't go to work, we're not allowed to, or if we're in the building sector, we may be able to. What can we do to manage that in some simple steps for ourselves?
Well, something I think is really helpful in kind of thinking about is what actually happens when we're thrown into a new situation where we don't have the familiarity, we don't have the patterns, we don't have the routine. And, particularly it's backtracking a little bit into some of the content Michele was sharing around, some of the really sort of devastating consequences of some people being at home, whether it's women or children who find their safe place at school. A lot of what happens when we are thrown out of what we call our normal or our routine, our minds don't love that. So we kind of go in this sort of beginning panic mode where we start to think from a different part of our brain. Like what separates us from animals as human beings is that we've got our prefrontal cortex, which is where we do all of our higher order thinking, where we have our empathy and where we can do critical thinking and be rational and be logical. Whenever we go into like a crisis mode, our default setting is to go to a different part of our brain. So your prefrontal cortex is approximately there. But we've got this part of our brain called our basal ganglia. It's like the primitive brain, the reptilian brain. It's where we go when we feel crisis coming. And we get kind of stuck there because we don't know how to get out of it. So we start looping in these negative thoughts. We have apparently it's 80% of our thoughts are negative thoughts. So they're thoughts like regrets that we have about what we did or didn't do in the past, like I should have done this or that. Fear of stuff that's coming in the future, which would be probably really anchored for a lot of people in this particular context. Like, what if this happens or what if that happens? We compare ourselves in unhealthy ways to other people, and we have a lot of blame. So those are kind of the ways we think negatively. And whenever we go into crisis mode, we're there looping and all that negative stuff. It's not like we're not kind of taught how to notice that we're there and get out of it. But that's a really important thing. And this is just a really simple, super simple strategy of how to do that. Well, your prefrontal cortex is where you think, right? This is where you're looping in negative habits that literally you can just stay stuck and spiral down. I talked to one of my student clients today who's got a parent who's just literally spiraling down and all these negative thoughts, and it just gets worse and worse and deeper and deeper. He has no idea how to loop out of this, right? One strategy, if you notice yourself feeling really negative and feeling like it just feels like this is just the truth, this is just the way the world is right now. If you feel like that, and I felt like that, like during this whole pandemic situation, that's you looping here, which is very normal, very primal. To get out of that, a really simple strategy is actually just to do something that you have to do inside this part of your brain, which is to be logical or think or be rational. And it can be as simple as doing something like counting by 23s. You go 23, 46, 69, and by the time you're that far into it takes just a few seconds. By the time you're that far into it, your mind's now there, not looping in all this negativity. And it's not it's not the kind of thing that just will keep you from doing that forever. You'll have to do that a few times, and then you'll get really good and build that muscle of how to bring yourself out of the negativity. Andrew, Gill, I forgot what you even asked now.
Well, we're talking about ways that we can kind of, what you explained there is really important, because we all do it. You talked about the primal, we talk about the lizard brain. It's how we react to things. It's untraining what our instincts are.
Absolutely.
And working on structures that we can change. Now, Lee, when I was talking to you, and where I'm in Melbourne, I barrack for Richmond. Richmond Football Club are a great example of using mindfulness very clearly, but also having deliberate thought. And you talk about being intentional. So, Lee, can you just break that up a bit more for us to let us understand, if I am in that spiraling area, and potentially it's always very hard when a younger person has to look after an older person, especially when they're still maybe at school looking after a parent. That's a really delicate area, and they would need, I presume, some other resource somewhere. One of these websites and contact numbers might help later. But can you just give us maybe another way of thinking? Maybe this is a moment just to show. Andrew, can you just put up my beautiful picture that I took yesterday when I was in the garden? So this is everybody. This is me yesterday. And I was talking to Leah about what I was doing. I was actually digging a tree stump out. Now, it took me about 5 hours to get to that stage, and it's still out there. I'm looking at it outside my office window now. But the point was, when I was in that space, I wasn't thinking about anything else. And that was another way of just being intentional or being in a mindful state. So, Lee, can you give us another sense of, again, we're inside, it's 4 walls, it's raining, it's cold. I can't even really go for a little run or anything. How else can I just unlock myself from where I am to actually working on something else that might help me down the track?
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of research from a woman who is a professor at Yale University, and she's got this class it's apparently the most popular class that's ever been taught at Yale University, and it's on well-being. And her belief is that we think that happiness comes from, the amazing job, the huge house, the fancy car, the, good looks, the everything, all of the...
I thought you were talking about me there for a second, Leah, but obviously you're not.
The big stump in the backyard.
That's me.
And her thing is that, it's actually not that at all. And she's got this concept called time affluence, which is you could have all those things, but if you don't have the experience of time, like you've got time to do the things that you believe are important to you, or you always feel like you get home and you don't even have any energy to connect with your kids or your partner. If you don't have an experience of having time, like I've so many sort of executive clients I've worked with, they tick every single box for being successful, which in turn should mean happy, but there's a huge gap because they don't have the experience of having time to do the things and be with the people on the level that they want to be with. So, I'm thinking about this in the context of, isolation and needing to be at home, and thinking about, what if we flip it and say that actually right now, we are in a time where for some people who are at home and who don't have work to go to, that's the circumstance that they literally have no control over at this moment. What if we thought about it from the standpoint of you actually have one of the greatest prerequisites for happiness that exists for us, to have an experience of time. And if you have that time, what can you do with it? What could you say, like 5 years from now, reflecting back on, the pandemic in 2020, what could you create now that you in 5 years time would reflect back on and go, wow, that was actually born out of that experience. To have the time to, do the project I've always been thinking I would love to do, but just have never felt like I had the time, or to create the connection with a child that I never thought that I would have the time to do because I'm just so in the rat race, or just working so many hours. This could be something where we reflect and we go, actually, amazing things got invented, got born out of this, because it's brand new. Like, it's brand new, and that's why we kind of loop back here. But if we can bring ourselves to here and start going, what is it for me? What would be a project, a side project, a passion project? Maybe there's something that I've always thought, oh, it would be a little bit too hard to create the time to actually begin. What could I start now? How could I use this time and look back on it and go, wow, like that was actually a gift.
So everyone, I think that's a really important area to think about. Maybe, and I want to come back to the poll. We'll come back to the first poll in a second too, Andrew, if I can. But maybe, Michele, the other hard thing is, while we are hearing this statement about we're all in it together, it is different for different people. Now, for you, I'm sure, you are still running a team. You are looking after a lot of people. So your team are going probably, how harder, Michele? 25, 30%, 40% busier than they may be ever, usually at this time of year. Other people have just lost their job. Other people are concerned about their job. Maybe what I might do, Michele, there's a video question we also had from a young tradeswoman as well. Maybe we'll play that question first, and we'll come to Leah. Then I'll ask you your question there, Michele. You've got a bit of thinking time now. So can we play this little question, please? This is from Alicia.
Some of us are struggling right now financially, and then some of us might be a bit concerned about the future. So there's a lot of uncertainty around money, and I was just wondering if, in regards to NLP, if there's any specific things we can do to sort of balance out our emotions around finances, especially with all this uncertainty. Are there sort of hand mnemonics that we should be doing every day, or other NLP strategies that we can incorporate into our mindset every single day?
So that's Alicia. She actually videoed that question into us, and thank you so much, Alicia. We hope you are on the line. For you, Leah, what's your advice to a young tradeswoman? She's still working now. She's a painter and decorator at the moment, but there's that worry. And if you're a young person, you know, we are lucky that the government is saying we are going to support you to some extent, but still you need to feel comfortable that you are going to be okay. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think worry starts in a place where there's worry that you can, that if you take action, you can make a difference in the outcome. And there's other worry where you can take action and it won't actually impact the outcome. So I think figuring out where people feel like they stand with that is probably paramount. I mean, I heard a lot in her voice that it felt like she didn't really know what she could do about it. And I guess, you know, I mean, I always go back to the mindset that we have. So, I mean, there's a part of our brain that's at the very back of your brain called your reticular activating system. And that's a big, long phrase. It basically just means it's the filter that you see everything through. And it's the filter that decides what of everything there is to notice in the world at any given moment, because we can't process all the information that exists. We go into overload. So this is basically the gatekeeper. It decides what of everything that there is to notice right now, what am I going to notice? And it's programmed by our experience, by our upbringing, by our school, by our friends, by our colleagues, by the media, by culture, by pandemic. It's piling in information that decides what we notice. And the interesting thing is whatever is in there is what we connect with out in the world. So whatever's in our filter is basically going, if it matches what's in here already, I'll let it in. So this is why when you go from having a Ford to deciding you're now going to drive a Toyota, why you start to see Toyotas on the road everywhere. They just occur to you. You don't have to go looking for them. They actually just show up in what you notice. That's your mind going, oh, Leah's decided Toyota's her thing. I'm going to make all the connections I can for her to Toyota. So it's like this unconscious support for whatever you've decided that you identify with, right? So when I heard Melisha, was it Melisha? Alicia's, what she was saying, I guess one thing that kind of occurred to me was, you know, to be intentional about putting something in your filter that you're going to make connections to. So I don't know. So it's like, this is, I mean, I work with goal setting, because when you set a goal, that goal goes into your filter. When you land on a goal that you want to achieve, the power of a goal is that it goes in your filter, and then your unconscious mind goes, oh, this is what Leah's interested in. This is what she's focusing on. I'm going to make all the connections that I can for her to get, just like it's all the Toyotas. So to really create something like, what is a goal? And start there. And this is not like a one and done kind of thing. It's a process. It's a journey. It takes practice. But to start at that point where you're being intentional about what you're putting in your filter, and then in turn what you're noticing in the world, because if what's in your filter is that, you know, it's all doom and gloom and this is going to set me back, and, you know, it's going to take ages for me to come back up to speed. If you decide that goes in your filter, and then your unconscious mind goes to work and it goes, I'm going to find all the connections I can for that. This is like all doom and gloom and it's going to take forever for me to catch back up. It's literally that simple. It's extraordinarily simple. I wouldn't say it's easy, because it's not our natural default setting, but that's the way it works.
And maybe, Leah, another way for Alicia and others to think about, if there were concerns about income coming in, potentially it might be talking to an accountant, talking to a friend, talking to your bank. If you had a small loan, if you even have a small credit card, talk to the bank, talk to anyone who you owe money to, talk to the person you're renting their house from. We know the government's looking at all these steps to make sure that these things are at least reduced or put on hold. And so as soon as those things are clear, then at least you have some space to think about some of this positive work that Leah's talking about. Michele, I'm living you out there. I know you're still there in Sydney. I know you're still there in Piedmont. You can probably see the Sydney Harbour, and the ferries are still probably moving around on that beautiful stretch of water. Maybe just for a second, can I cross back to Fiona? Because, Fiona, we haven't even got to that first poll. Can you give me a bit of a rough update on the poll at this stage, Fiona?
Sure. Hello, Andrew. Hello, everyone. Some great chats going on in the chat as well, which I just want to touch on too. But firstly, our poll, it looks like 65% of our guests are secret agents. So got a few bonds out there.
Cue the music, Andrew.
Second to that, though, we do have a lot of employers online, so that's really good to see. We've got equally as many tradies and apprentices as well, and no family members. So rather interesting group happening.
Well, maybe we need some privacy. So maybe we're actually taking some time out after work to get into a place, a secret agent place, to have some private time with tradeswomen Australia. Now, Fiona, lots of points of view coming down on this feed around people who are working more than ever, or also talking about how they don't have a time or space to do their things. They're working from home, exercise. There's some of the names have just gone off my slide here, but so can you give me another sense of some of your sense of what you're seeing on our participants, or from our participants?
A lot of chat happening about working from home, having less, or Alison says, has less control of my time, not treated as separate as it used to be, which is understandable. You know, you have your laptop on the kitchen table and you swap to the couch to watch Netflix. You can't really escape work at the moment, can you? So a lot of similar feelings felt across there, maybe also because of daylight savings, as Alicia suggested. So yeah, difficult times. How do we really separate work from the things we enjoy when you are at home?
Well, maybe we could ask the CEO at APM, looking after all things mental wellness. Can you give us a sense in that space, in terms of, Michele, how are you directing or giving advice to your employees about how they separate their work day? We heard from Leah earlier about you talked about the 50-minute period. How can we then separate the day from the dinner to after dinner time in our same space, if I'm just in maybe a single room or a small flat?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew, and I think that the challenge is more than just that. while some people have technically more time because they might not be doing the commute or they might not be doing something else, they might also be having to homeschool children and manage a whole range of other issues. So that feeling of having less time will be real for many people. And I think you've also got people where 2 or 3 or 4 people are all at home trying to work from home or study from home, maybe with a bit of a stretch on your internet connection. So there's a whole bunch of challenges that are facing people. So there's not one answer. But I'll come back to the routine comment. So, if you are supposed to finish work at 5:30, then it's important to finish work at 5:30. And if you can, have a physical separation from work and then home, because normally you would have that physical separation from work to home. So if that means you finish at 5:30, even if you go outside and go for a walk around the block and come back again, you're now coming home from work. And so you're reframing where you are, and you're coming in the door then to set for dinner, or you'll have, so you have to create some of those separations that aren't there by virtue of the way that we are having to work. And you're absolutely right. Some people are just at a kitchen table. If you've got the luxury of an office or the luxury of space, that's great. But so many people don't have that. Trying to schedule a teleconference while your child is sleeping and hoping, that the timing is going to come off, creates a whole other layer of stress for people that they didn't have before. So, there's a whole bunch of things at play that we just didn't have.
And this person is quite a famous person. They're still working now, but they're a very well-known entertainer. And I was once in their very swanky hotel doing an event with them, but they invited me to their room after. Nothing hanky-panky, just to be in their room for a while. And they had all of their photos of their family in frames. They were only there for one night. And this person travelled probably 100 nights a year. Wow. And they travelled with their own pillow, and the photos come out. When I go travelling, I just want to just work out of my bag. But I thought it was such a lovely little idea. That was their routine, to just get rid of the concept of where they were. I know we all want to be in a hotel now, apart from people who've come back from overseas. I know a hotel would be a great idea just for one day. I've seen people online actually saying, I'm going on a virtual holiday this weekend, where should I go? And so their friends are nominating where they should go. But I think going back to your more important point, Michele, it is those simple routine steps of actually, and I know working from home, the things I don't do well are exactly those things. I keep going, I pop out and have dinner with the family, I keep coming back to my office, and they're the things that aren't really good. I'm self-employed, so I sort of balance it that way. But those simple steps, Leah, would you have any other little tips like that? Because they're the things that seem, that's an insight for me, Michele, just walking outside, going for a 500-metre walk, coming back and saying, I'm done. How good's that?
Mm.
And leave your phone at home.
Yeah.
Leave your phone at home. That's a good idea too.
It's one of those things that we all crave. We crave that routine. And when we're thrown out of the routine, the prospect of starting a new routine feels, there's actually a word for it. It's called activation energy. To take an action for the first time that's starting a new routine or outside of your normal routine, it takes something. It feels almost exhausting to do something that's against the flow of either a routine or trying to create a new routine. But you build your momentum with that, and it takes a few times and it starts to feel like your new normal. I think it's just really worth pushing through those moments.
Do you think that's something else that actually we can actually start to understand, that actually this is a new thing? It's a bit like saying 20 years ago the trains weren't this full. Mm. We have to accept that the trains, not now, but they are very busy. So that's what we have to put up with. Mm. If we actually, do you think both, Leah, and Michele, do you think potentially in a couple of weeks' time, if we get those systems right early, we will then actually be in a better place in a couple of weeks or in another few weeks based on our circumstances?
Absolutely. Look, the world ahead of us needs us to be able to be more agile and more flexible and more dynamic. And like it or not, that's what this situation is forcing us to do, because we have to find other ways to get the same outcomes we were getting before. So we don't have the luxury of saying everything will just go back to the way it was, because the world already has changed. Our challenge is to adapt to that. So I think you might have mentioned before, you know, one of the things that's really important is the connection. So one of the biggest mental health challenges is around that loss of human connection, the loneliness, not being able to be with family and friends, etc. So phone is good, people are doing gaming together, but when you have meetings, turn your camera on. Just the visual connection, as well as the voice connection, helps you to say, that is another way for me to maintain that connection. I can't do it the way I did before, but how can I replicate that in another way? And that's what we're going to need to keep doing. We're going to need to keep thinking differently about how we replicate to get to the same kind of outcomes, because we may be in this space for some time to come. So it is challenging.
Alison Wall is saying that she's using, or her company's using, Zoom to keep in contact. I know last night it was Easter Sunday on Sunday night, so I was FaceTiming my various family members and my cousins or my nephews and nieces, and it was just fun just to have that little moment of contact. We'd usually just make a phone call. We've also got celebrities watching in. Senator Louise Pratt, all the way in WA, she's giving us our support. So thank you, Senator, for being with us tonight. We might maybe get you on the show and see how it's going over in the West. I think you can still swim in Western Australia, but you can't come across state borders. So every state doing it a bit differently, and I'm sure you're working very hard to make sure that all the West Australians are being looked after the best they can. I wonder also whether we can think about how these new skills that we have to learn are going to change. Can I go to our second poll, though? Because I don't think we've actually checked in with our second poll. This is another one. This might help us with our next webcast coming up in a couple of weeks. New regulations and social distancing is impacting and there's a number of options there. My job, my staff productivity, my relationships, my mindset, physical health, mental health. It hasn't impacted me at all. So let's find out what you think about that. We'll come back just towards the end of the broadcast. Maybe this is another area we can really start thinking about, because I think lots of people are talking about how we need to stay in contact in different ways. When we are at work, we can see if someone's feeling maybe a bit down, or if their behaviour is a bit different from normal. It might be we see some physical clues about how they're feeling. We can, and a number of people are saying, I can go and talk to my colleagues, but online it's a bit harder. Can we maybe think again, maybe with you first, Michele, because you've got this large network of employees and employers you have to work with and look after, not have to, but you need to look after. Can we talk a bit about how we check in on each other? And I know we've gone around it, but let's be focused back on how we can look after each other when we're not actually in the same space.
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. And in a way, it's no different to the importance of checking in before this, because people close to you will see something, will observe something, and they're in that great space to be able to say, is everything okay? I'm just checking in. It doesn't have to be a formal conversation, just that, I just want to check how you're going. Is everything working okay for you? We still need to do that. Now, sometimes that's harder to do, having spoken about the camera, sometimes that's harder to do with a visual, and it's easier to do by phone. So just picking up the phone. So one of the things I do, I have a video conference with all of my team every day, but every day I phone two of them. Just checking in. How are you doing? What are you finding challenging? Is everything working for you? How else can we help you? Are there some things that you, might be experiencing that you weren't expecting? Is there, and, different people will have different responses to that, but making it okay to have that conversation. And I find that works easier by phone. Because the visual almost now has become the business world, and it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to say, you know what, I'm actually maybe not managing quite so well.
So you just take it's just like informal kind of keep people guessing, give them a call, give an email, send a little funny photo off. Just those little. I'm finding even some of my mates who don't even, we might talk once every 3 months, are ringing to see how you're going. Is everything going okay? It has opened it up. I know even just where I live, there've been lots of people walking up and down the street that I've never seen before. They're coming into our street. They're not our neighbours. That's an opportunity. But Leah, for you too, you are, you said you're talking to one of your student clients today. How do you recommend also people to keep in touch and just keep in contact?
I think it's about the frequency, but I also think it's about, what you're willing to bring in the moment in the communication. And really, it's not what we're used to. But I think in these times, the impact of low social connection is actually really taxing on the body even, it's hardcore. Like the stats are that we're more anxious, we're more depressed, we're more violent, and even like on a physical level, when we're not connected to people, we've got more inflammation in our bodies. Apparently it's worse than smoking and high blood pressure, obesity. We have greater longevity if we're highly socially connected. So, this is a time where we really have to be, super intentional about how we're being in our conversations that would normally just be very matter of fact and normally quite practical when you're on the phone or something. And the best way to do it is to give something, is to be a little bit vulnerable and to bring yourself, to share how you're feeling, getting it out of your head where you're looping in all those negative thoughts, and just share what your experience is, and probably that'll free up other people to feel like, oh, they're normal too. Because I think probably one of the things that's happening is that we all kind of think we're doing this in many ways. All right.
Just tell them, Leah, that you will only be able to consult with them after 6:30 because you're busy till then. You're in demand. That's what it's about. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I had a dog. You had a phone. You're the professional.
Right. There we go. We're human.
I had a fairy friend come in the door. It's all fine. So they are really important steps. And I think everybody, we've also this is a really serious point, but Jen has just listed here, she had a very unusual experience in that her father passed away during the pandemic. And this meant a vastly different and much smaller funeral. And I can only imagine, Jen, what that is like. I've got a friend who's in his final stages of life too, and we really can't imagine what that's like. And you have said, because we were forced out of the lockdown dealing with my father's illness and the funeral. So that is another really, a personal view, and thank you for letting us in on your family's grief and your loss, and we do wish you all the best for that, Jen. Everybody, I think Louise as a party has just listed here, networking opportunities for diverse groups of tradies or within trades. So maybe there's another way of just getting a little connection up. It might be WhatsApp app just in the group that or maybe even ringing some trades you don't know, but are in your area. Who knows? There are things to think about. We are coming up to the close. Can we just go back to you, Fiona? Give us a sense of the breakdown of how people were feeling. I love Richard Dent, who's been making some funny comments throughout this. I love this, Richard. We might have to get you in as our special comments person. Richard Dent said, of A to G, job, my staff, productivity, all of the above. So can you just give us a sense, Fiona, of what other people thought? Yeah,
sure. There's been a lot of really great chats happening in the background and a lot of people resolving each other's questions as well, which has been fantastic. But some great questions that came through that we probably didn't get time to touch on. We will record them later and send them out to you. There was some questions and some requests for information sharing. So if we have any resources available, we will have this as a video MP4, so we will send it to you, and our guests are going to send us through some resources as well that we'll also share with you. But if there's anywhere else we could go for resources, that would be a huge help, Andrew.
Fantastic. All those resources. So everybody, we are now at that first hour of power. We've had 2 of these great sessions. Really, there are lots of other topics to touch on. We haven't really got into the detail about how we talk about our mental health with those around us. And I don't want to leave that aside. But if we at the end of this session, we have listed a range of contacts points, and I know they're only websites and phone numbers, but very importantly, there are organisations like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, Mind Out, which is an organisation that I hadn't heard before, which looks after mental health issues for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex people. I haven't heard of that organisation before. Kids Helpline, you can see them up there now, Headspace, etc. So these are organisations that you can call. Lifeline is 24 hours. Beyond Blue is 24 hours. Kids Helpline is 24 hours. So we don't want to just palm that off. I really want to recognise the fantastic support we have today of Michele Grove, the CEO of Mental Health and Wellness APM, Leah Davidson, our professional coach, Fiona McDonald for putting all of this together, and also Andrew Power behind the scenes. And everybody, thank you for the detailed questions you have given us. They have been absolutely fantastic. And we will get this back to you as best we can. I'm sorry we didn't share all your points through the webcast, but we really want to thank you for your feedback and your detail. I wish you all the best in the future. We want to thank all of our tradeswomen and men and industry advisors who have helped immensely behind the scenes and beyond the scenes. In a fortnight, we are talking training online, which kind of links into another thing you can do if you can't get out. And it's a really good way to think about upskilling you in your trade or new skills that might be into management or project management, etc. So please register and invite your trade friends and colleagues along. We'll have a link up around Thursday for that. If you have questions, please send them in. And again, please give us your email messages as well. Most importantly, the conditions we've talked about today may have changed from when we first recorded this today on Tuesday, the 14th of April, 2020. And as we are talking about on behalf of Tradeswomen Australia, do self-isolate physically, but do not self-isolate mentally. Look after yourselves, talk to your friends, family, even neighbours, across the fence, even across the road. Call and FaceTime and party online and stay well. So again, we'll just get a wave. Thank you to Michele. Another wave to Michele. Thanks, Michele. She might have gone. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you to Fiona and thank you to Andrew. Everybody have a great evening. Hopefully there's been some help here and we will see you very, very soon.